Meghan Markle is really in a pickle because the latest Vanity Fair piece once again reiterated what so many of us have been talking about for so long. In fact, there's just a sense of vindication now, which is that, yes, Meghan Markle is the problem. Despite all of her naysaying and deflecting and dismissing, no. Meghan Markle is the reason she and Harry are failing. Meghan Markle is the reason they are so unlikable. Meghan Markle is the reason why she is so publicly unliked. She is the problem. And this is actually rather fascinating because for so long, if you didn't like Meghan Markle, you were called many things. And that was because essentially she had sort of shielded herself in a very particular way to deflect any and all criticism. But that's no longer working. And even her media friends and allies can also see that that's no longer working. That, in fact, there are very serious allegations against her that can no longer be dismissed as either rumors or a smear campaign by the palace or the British press. Meghan Markle once again has been accused of bullying staff members and even pushing some into therapy because her methods are so harsh. And this is sort of the grand lesson Meghan Markle should learn from this Vanity Fair piece. In fact, there are many, and we'll go over them today in this video. But number one, that I think everybody who has been sort of on the, you could call it anti Meghan or truth seeking bandwagon could say is that, yes, we were right. And so many in the mainstream media were wrong. And this is why channels like this and others exist, because it's so important to get the alternative side out there, because the media so often just wants to ignore certain things. But it's getting to the point where it can no longer be ignored. And Meghan Markle needs to face reality. She has a problem. And the only way her PR is going to get any better is if she deals with herself. So, guys, we shall get into this. But if you haven't been to Royal News Network before, hello, my name is Brittany and I provide compelling royal commentary. So go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I would absolutely love to have you back. And don't forget to check out the Crown Report. I will put a link up above here. It is a channel that I have started recently where I'm posting bits of a longer segment of a program that I do going over all the royal news. So if you want to know more about the Maria's case in Norway, what's going on in Spain, Catherine, everything like that, we'll have bits here from the latest Crown Report coming out this week, including a lot of congratulations from various monarchs to the new president, Donald Trump. We will have it all right there and what we can expect for 2025 and beyond. So if you guys want to hit that subscribe button here and there, that would be awesome. But of course, it's all up to you. Thank you so much for checking all of those out. So let's get into this because the Vanity Fair piece has hit Meghan and Harry, I think, pretty hard. And we did get sort of a randomness from Harry and Meghan, you could say, in the Times. And I think for Meghan Markle especially, you can tell she is still trying to ride the wave and ignore the naysayers. And we see this as evidenced in the Times. This is Harry and Meghan's response. The Times is a very respectable publication. Now, they don't have a lot from Harry and Meghan, but they do have that Harry and Meghan dismiss the distressing allegations in Vanity Fair, which is sort of ridiculous because the whole point of the Vanity Fair article is that Meghan is trapped in a constant victim cycle and she always thinks that everybody else is wrong and she is always right. And so essentially by just saying this, they're essentially proving that article correct, or at least that point, and you can suspect many other points as well, because their initial reaction, of course, is to dismiss this. Now, this sort of worked maybe in the beginning when the allegations against Meghan Markle and her bullying behavior first came out seriously in 2021, right before the Oprah Winfrey interview. Others were reporting on bad behavior before, but this is when it initially became serious, was right before the Oprah Winfrey interview, and it was very detailed by Valentine Lowe. You can see a lot of that if you buy his book, Courtiers. I'll link it up above here. It's very, very good, and he is a very respectable reporter. This was not gossip rag material. You can basically say this was in the New York Times. Now, obviously, people have issue with the New York Times and its political bias, but this was good reporting. But Harry and Meghan are still on the same track, which number one means Meghan Markle has learned zero lessons over the last 4 years. She's learned zero. Zero lessons. So let's just get into the little bit that it says here, which is not much. So it says the Duke and Duchess of Sussex are understood to have dismissed allegations against them, reported in a Vanity Fair article that sources close to the couple described as distressing. Now, these should not be a surprise. These should not be distressing. Why? Because we have seen all this for years now. Absolutely years. This has been going on seriously since 2021. And even before then, details of Duchess' difficult behavior. None of this should be a surprise to them. None of this. That they're even dismissing it shows you how disconnected they are from reality at this point. There should be no dismissal. You guys did the bad thing. You guys did the bad thing. And I think the big thing here too is that Meghan really is the problem. Meghan is the problem. And it goes down here also as well to say sources close to the Sussexes said that previous employees had gone on the record in the past to dispute the claims made in the article. So this was from probably the Hollywood Reporter piece. And I did a whole video on the Us Weekly article. If you want to see that, I'll link it up above. And that article was terrible because it overdid the reaction to the negative Hollywood Reporter story. Because if you look back at the timeline, we have the Times of London, then we have more stuff in Tom Bower, we have Valentine Lowe, and we have just a series of little articles about Meghan's bad behavior. Then it comes up again in the Hollywood Reporter. It's a very succinct article, it doesn't go into many details, but says that Meghan Markle is a dictator in high heels and basically a demon to work for. Nobody wants to work with her. She's terrible. They all like Harry, but they hate her. And then we now have this Vanity Fair piece, which is much longer and much more detailed and goes through what we already knew was a bad situation with Spotify. And I'm sure the behaviors have extended into Netflix as well. And so the biggest thing is Meghan Markle's had 4 years to adjust her behavior. And she hasn't because she thinks she's not the problem. And the thing in the Vanity Fair piece that says is that she's stuck in this perpetual victimization cycle. She always thinks she's the victim. And that's not a method of success, really. And that's sort of indicative of somebody who's a failure, who cannot admit fault, because how you get better is by admitting you are wrong and changing a behavior, changing a decision, or changing how you're responding to something. So if you feel like you're not disciplined enough, hey, get up an hour earlier every morning. That's what I think to myself. I'm like, I need to get up earlier. I need to get up. Rarely do I succeed. But the whole idea is maybe if I get up earlier in the morning, I'll get more accomplished. Meghan is not that like that person. She probably blames the sun for rising too early or rising too late so she doesn't get in on time. That is Meghan Markle's mentality. And they will always fail because they can't get out of that mindset. So when it comes to, let's say, I'll give an example for myself, writing. I am a pretty good writer now, but I was a pretty poor writer before. Do you know how I got better? I wrote a lot and I had people edit my work. And wouldn't you know it, my work got better. It got a lot better. And that only comes from admitting you're not the best and you need refinement. When you can get that refinement, things get better. Meghan can't do that. And that is what is destroying her and Harry at this point, is that inability to take criticism, that inability to adjust what they're doing for the times, for the situations, all these sorts of things. This is why she is constantly always going to fail. She will always fail because of this. And the Vanity Fair article laid it out quite well. I don't think that was their intention. They might have gone into writing that piece thinking, oh, we're just going to find some great things about Harry and Meghan. And all they could find was problem after problem, disgruntled employee after disgruntled employee. And they couldn't ignore it anymore. They couldn't ignore it. The writing was on the wall. And perhaps Meghan and Harry don't have the protection of WME or something else anymore. And it's sort of laid bare for everyone to see. And particularly, I think they're putting the blame and the failures at her feet. So the other thing that you got out of that article, or something that you should have gotten out of that article, is that Harry is rather dim. I mean, I hate to say it, but basically they almost essentially called him dumb. They didn't come out right out and say that, but there was a bit talking about how his only interest appeared to be polo and that there seemed to be nothing else going on in his head. So all I can think of is a South Park episode of him running around the front yard playing polo. And I can think that must be what goes through the guy's head every single night.
We are here because privacy is a basic human right. How many more princes and his wives have to live in this nightmare?
Is that little bit. And that's not essentially super flattering. And it proves that part of the reason they're failing is because he's really dim. He's not good at this. He's only good at shaking hands and doing something for half a second, looking sort of like a royal, and then sitting down and shutting up. That is essentially his skill level. And that does not a good relationship with Hollywood make, because what Hollywood is looking for is success. And those two can't bring it, in part because he's not a bright guy. He is not a bright guy. And this is incredibly ill suited to him. The only thing apparently he is capable of doing is being royalty. And that's it. So she brought him all the way over from the United Kingdom to set up this grand place in the United States, only for it to be an abject failure, because they are abject failures. Both of them are. And in particular, him, he cannot help the situation that she set up because he is honestly incapable of helping them. He just seems to be fully incapable, though. He had this idea for a sociopath podcast, How I Became a Sociopath, and he was going to interview like Mark Zuckerberg, Vladimir Putin, Donald Trump. Like, I mean, that's just dumb. That's just absolutely a stupid idea. None of those type of men would go for it at all. And it doesn't even make a ton of sense. But that was Harry's level of contribution. And his whole thought process, which was incredibly arrogant, was that, well, I had childhood trauma and I turned out just fine. They had childhood trauma and they turned out to be sociopaths. So he's coming at it automatically from a place of superiority, which he's not, because he has deep psychological issues. I mean, he talked about trying to chase imaginary dragons when it came to his fights with the media. I don't know about you, but I don't think about imaginary dragons anymore. That's sort of a, like a 5 to 9 thing, like a 5-year-old to 9-year-old type thing. I think he's old enough to know he can't fight dragons anymore, but you gotta question the sanity there. So it's just not a good look for Harry and not a good look for her, because she picked him. She picked him. I mean, he picked her too, but she picked him. And the other thing that makes Meghan Markle look like a definite failure here is that she has been given a lot of sound advice and refused to follow it. Every article, this was especially in the Hollywood Reporter and in this Vanity Fair article, says they've been given advice and they constantly disregard it and then get mad if they follow their own ways and that flops. Can you imagine how aggravating it would be as an employee telling you, I told you to do X, you did Y, and then you found out later that X was better, and then you're blaming me for you doing Y? Like, that's just maddening. It's just maddening. But I can so see that happening. Why? Because we have so many failures surrounding them. 40 by 40. What the heck happened with that? Meghan made this big announcement. She's turning 40 and she's going to get 40 women to help up 40 other women, and nothing. I mean, we don't even have any indication at all that anything occurred, really. Do we even know if the mentors-mentee relationships were set up? Do we know the outcomes of that? Granted, they could be considered private, but that also gives the indication that nothing happened. And she did this whole splashy thing with Melissa McCarthy and everything. It just didn't go anywhere. And it just doesn't make them look very good, in particular her. And she has other things. She talked to Variety about, oh, I love rom-coms. I want to do a rom-com. Why aren't there no more rom-coms? Like, really kind of dumb, like, line of thought. And has she done a rom-com? No. They bought her one option and she couldn't even get it off the ground. And they also talk about, when it comes to her, is that she started on the podcast process. So they signed the deal with Spotify in the fall of 2020. Might have even been December. And by 2021, they had nothing. So Spotify had to go in there and help them bring it to the finish line. And the reason for that is that Meghan both simultaneously cannot take advice, wants control, and just everything is a train wreck. And she was apparently horrific to the staff, which leads us to our next. Meghan Markle, you could call it blunder, mistake, or obvious failing here. I'm going to call it obvious failing because that just seems appropriate. Is that She is still allegedly bullying staff members. Staff members said they basically avoided her like the plague. They tried to take extended leaves of absences. They went into therapy all to avoid Meghan Markle. That's how horrifically awful she is to work for. Is that people literally had to do anything on the planet they could do to escape her sights. That's bad. That's really, really bad. And we have again heard this for years at this point. She can't deflect this anymore. She can't deflect this anymore. She's going to try, but it's going to fail and she's going to lead to more failures because I think Jack Royston, who is actually formerly more of a pro Sussex person in the media, talked about how Meghan Markle needs to do like sort of one simple thing. There were a couple two options, which is to continue to dismiss. I can't remember what his other one was. I think to admit a mistake or something. But his it's sort of overall conclusion, which is pretty apt. And I think really her only way forward is to admit. And she would have to massage this because this is what people do in PR, is to basically say she was trying to do her best, but obviously failed in some way. She has to acknowledge fault. That's the only way she's going to help herself is to acknowledge fault, but it's the one thing she can't do. She can't do. She's going to destroy what's left of her public reputation because she simply can't apologize. She can't acknowledge that, yeah, maybe she was too tough on her employees. Yeah, maybe she should adjust how she talks to people, how she interacts with people, those sorts of things. It's the one thing she's going to be unable to do. She can't do it. And that's why she'll still fail because at this point, it has gone around Hollywood completely that she is awful to work for, that she doesn't listen to advice. And so anybody getting involved with them has to be ready for some horrible times ahead. And that just seems to be the case. That's what everybody essentially at this point is reporting. So it's just one of those things where it's just not going to get any better for her. And her like best option at this point is to acknowledge her failings here. I just don't think she can do it. The other failing Meghan has here, and this article again revealed, is that Meghan apparently went to some sort of publisher trying to farm a potential divorce book. Now, while it goes on to say it wasn't sure if it could totally confirm it, but it's an interesting thought because my thought has always been is that Meghan Markle's best out when things get really bad with Harry is going to be to divorce him. And I don't mean just that their marriage is failing. I mean that she feels like she can't make more money. She feels like she's stuck in a corner and needs to reinvent herself again. And he is disposable. He is 100% disposable to her. And this goes back to him being dim. Like she could rake him over the coals, call him all sorts of things, highlight all of his mental instability. And if he's not smart, he might be totally clueless and completely and utterly destroyed in the press by her. I mean, if I was Harry and I was part of their PR team, I would tell him, hey, you need to have your ducks in a row too. Because if she files before you and if you haven't protected yourself, it's going to be a rough ride. It's going to be a rough ride. And I just don't think Harry has done that. I just don't think Harry has done that. Maybe sort of when his other employee quit earlier this year, his chief of staff, maybe farming out the Hollywood Reporter piece might have been their way to sort of start laying the groundwork for a potential divorce. But I think the failing for Meghan and Harry is that if the fairy tale is well and truly dead, their sycophantic fans, the alleged Sussex squad, who have named themselves that for some idiotic reason, they're going to be mad that they believe the lie. Now, I think a lot of people are waking up to this reality. And I remember when Catherine and William got married, that one of my professors at the time, he was telling me that he didn't really believe the fairy tale this time. And I don't ever think Catherine and William ever presented themselves as a fairy tale because he had sort of, I guess, gone on the train of the fairy tale for Charles and Diana. And of course, we all know how that ended. Harry and Meghan, I don't think is going to be too different because I truly do believe divorce has always been part of Meghan Markle's plan. It's always been part of her plan. Now, if she can keep him and keep the money flowing, will she still do that? Yeah, it's helpful. But if keeping him is more of a liability than letting him go, if she thinks she can make more by divorcing him rather than staying with him, I think she'll jump ship. And If I was Harry, I'd be nervous that nothing about American Riviera Orchard is in his name and it's all in her name. Because what if she's earning all the cash? Now, granted, anything they earn together is kept, but maybe they have a prenup and maybe anything she makes in the marriage belongs to her and not him. That's a big question. That's a big question. But overall, I think people are starting to not believe the narrative anymore. This whole grand vision that they're so in love and everything. Even the article tried to sell, oh, they're so in love. And, you want somebody to look at you the way Harry and Meghan look at each other. It honestly sounds more unhealthy and more like obsession than it does love to me. It's just my personal opinion. And I think at the end of the day, when it comes to their relationship, there is a unhealthy dynamic to it. There's an unhealthy level of obsession because it sounds like Harry is a perfectly normal guy until he's walking around with her and he becomes so stinking paranoid about her safety. Now, granted, there could have been some threats early in the relationship, but I think part of her manipulation of him is to paint herself as his mother. We even had that in the article. There's sort of an Oedipus complex with them. So she has painted herself as his mother. And so he is obsessed with protecting her the way he couldn't his mother. So is he really protecting her? Is he really in love and fascinating with her? Or in a sense, with his mother? It's the idea of his mother's memory, of protecting his wife now when he couldn't his mother, really the attraction rather than actually Meghan Markle herself? That's a serious question because in some ways, the two of them have nothing in common. They're very different people. Very different people. Harry loved Africa and hunting and sports and those sorts of things. Meghan loves trinket jewelry, fashion, and yoga and shallow vein and vapid things. That was her thing. Not that Harry was, I don't think, particularly deep, but I think he had some general other interests before meeting her, but he had to give everything up in order to please her. And that's not good. If to have a relationship with your partner, you have to give up every hobby you previously enjoyed. I just don't think that it's healthy. Now, granted, like for example, for me, I'm personally not a big fan of hunting. But if my partner liked hunting, would I say, no, you can't hunt anymore? I would say, hunt, but don't tell me about it. Don't tell me about Bambi. Don't tell me about Thumper. Don't tell me about any of the animals you shot. Just keep it over there. Don't tell me anything about it. And we'll be okay. We'll be okay. Because that way you can enjoy something that you previously enjoyed. I have hobbies that maybe he doesn't get. And it all works together. But Harry and Meghan in this particular situation have nothing in common. And I think what people are starting to recognize is that maybe the fairy tale isn't real. And if they can't sell the fairy tale anymore, if they can't sell this narrative of them, essentially these Romeo and Juliet figures who had this epic love story that they had to fight through racism and bigotry and all these sorts of things to be together. If none of that exists, for example, if the racism and bigotry aspects of their dynamic fall apart because people are realizing, hey, maybe it's just because she's not a nice person, then the whole fairy tale dynamic disappears because now it looks more like a sort of dim-witted prince and a conniving actress that found their way together. So it's less sellable than the fairy tale, and that's a really big problem for them going forwards, but especially for her because I think she's been the one in a lot of ways to really try to construct that narrative. And the other reason why they're failing, and it was so fascinating in the Vanity Fair piece, is that they sort of want to save the world, but have no idea how to do that. That's dumb. Nobody should come out to something wanting to save the world, especially with their little rinky-dink operation Archwell. They're not going to save the world. There's something to the effect of knowing what you can do and what you can't do. I sort of love the serenity prayer, which is God grant me the strength to change what I can, strength to know what I cannot change, and the wisdom to know the difference. You can't change the world. That situation is reserved for like politicians. It's not reserved for two ex-royals with hardly any money to their name. Elon Musk can change the world. He has billions of dollars in the bank. Jeff Bezos can, Mark Zuckerberg can, and they have changed the world with their pieces of technology. However, Harry and Meghan cannot change the world. Fundamentally, they cannot because they are not unique and individual thinkers. They go with the crowd. They are not going against it. I saw a comment on X, which I thought was really interesting. It's talking about how Elon Musk is so weird. He's so weird. And I'm like, most geniuses, they're kind of weird. They think outside the box. Look at the sketches that Leonardo da Vinci did. They're fascinating. I read Walter Isaac's biography on Leonardo da Vinci. Didn't really care for the mathematics section, but it was very interesting because he divided the book up based on, he started individually with a biography, but we don't know like a ton about Leonardo, but we know a lot through his sketches. And so it's how he looked at his sketches. It's sort of the next thing. So engineering, mathematics, art, all these sorts of things. That's how you looked at Leonardo da Vinci. And he was weird and different because he thought beyond what he could see and thought into the future, thought of different things. He was one of those people who looked at the grass and seriously wondered, why is it green? Now, people like me, I just accept that it's green. Do I want to know why it's green? I don't really care. But he was one of those people who looked at the grass and goes, I want to know why that is green. I want to know the colors over there, the plants over here. I want to know the anatomy of human beings. How do muscles work? So I can better conceptualize those in my art. And you have Elon Musk doing the rockets, going up into space and catching the rockets coming back. Nobody ever conceived that would be possible. Now, granted, he had a lot of engineers that probably came up with most of those ideas, to be quite honest. But he was the guy who didn't say, oh, no, that's crazy. Don't do that. He's like, well, yeah, if we can do it, do it. Figure it out. Do it. And you need those type of people. Those type of people will change the world. Harry and Meghan, I mean, number one, Harry's dim. He essentially was called dumb in the article. So he's totally out of the shot. Meghan can't even play chess. She's only playing checkers. And so neither one of them can change the world because they fundamentally don't have the intelligence to do it. They don't have the thinking skills to do it. They don't have the creativity to do it. Now, am I saying other members of the royal family are going to be world changers? No, probably not, to be quite honest. But Harry and Meghan, this dim idea that, oh, we're going to change the world. We have no clue. But I don't know how to do that. Do you know how to do that? I don't know how to do that. Do you know how to do that? I don't know how to do it. They don't know how to do that because they fundamentally cannot think outside the box. I mean, even their letter to Meta regarding the fact checking and the terribleness of taking away the fact checking. The Telegraph was so right in saying that they're years behind the times now. They are on the wrong side of history. How in the world can they change things when they're on the wrong side of history? They're so far behind the curve that they can't even get to first base. They are not going to be the people to do that. So even saying that, even conceiving that on their part is ridiculous. Can they change things in their local community? Can they enact small changes? Of course. But these are two people who are never going to enact global change. We talk about them now, but we're talking about them as a train wreck. We're not saying and sharing the greatness of them. We're sharing their failures, their flops, their hardships. And that's not going to change. And that's not something to just be rude to them. That's just sort of highlighting the obvious. Like, we all have eyes. We see the failures here. You can't hide them from us, Harry and Meghan. You just can't hide them from us. But Harry and Meghan desperately want to. They desperately want a different way. And none of it is working. It's not working. It's not going to work. And they just need to accept that at this point. They just need to accept some failure here. And until they do that, they're not going to move forward. And you can't change anything in the world, not just because you don't know how to, but you don't even recognize the fundamental aspect of that. You individually can't. I can't change the world. I don't think I'm a smart enough thinker for that. I don't think I will ever get enough power to really, quote unquote, change the world. And I'm not really seeking to. You even got to think the delusional people, like the level of delusion to think that you can change the world with the minimal resources they have. I would say the minimal brain resources they have. It's just not going to happen. And the biggest reason for their failures, time and time again, is something quite simple. It's Meghan Markle. Meghan Markle is the reason they're failing. There's no other reason. There's no other way. She is their failure. She encompasses the entirety of their failure. Is her. All of her actions, all of her inactions, how she has portrayed herself to the media, all of it is a reason for failure. Their failures are the result of her. He, at his essence, it's just sort of their existing. That's simply basically what Vanity Fair said. He's just being pulled around by the nose by her into the various things. He has no clue, basically, what's going on. Literally, again, polo. That's the only thing in his head. That's the only thing in his head. So really, the burden is on her. And the thing is, she has failed fundamentally to live up to Mexit. That is the overall sense, is that She's the problem, and it has resulted in the failure to enact Brexit. That was the ultimate vision of the article, is that they set out to fund this media empire and they failed. And she's really the reason why. Because when it comes to Harry and Meghan, everybody knows Meghan's the brains of the operation. It was her idea to move to Hollywood. It was her idea to leave the royal family. It was her idea, her idea, her idea. We're not stupid. Would have Harry have come up with all of that? No. Would Harry have gotten them deals with Spotify and Netflix? Probably not. Probably not. She was the catalyst for those. But Meghan has a deep problem, which is that she's playing checkers when she should be playing chess. She bullies allegedly staff members out of jobs, and she can't take advice. She can't take criticism. There was one article, and I can't remember when it came out, basically saying that they didn't want anything negative told to them. Well, I'm sorry, but sometimes you need to hear the negative news. That's the only way you get better. It's one of those things that's like sort of critical to your operation, is that to know you have failed at something. There is negative press out there. Maybe you want to address it. Just dismissing it is not working anymore. That is not going to be the way forwards. They have to figure out how to address these things, how to adjust what they're doing, because what they're doing is not working. And she's the reason. She's the reason, because everybody says, even though all their aspects have failed, basically, people still generally like him and they hate her. And people aren't going to work with them if they can only deal with him part of the time, but they have to deal with her most of the time. And she's just terrible. That is a literal quote. She's just terrible. A dictator in heels, makes grown men cry. So many different things. She's just awful. And people can't work with her. She's the problem. She's the reason they're failing. She's the reason they can't get ahead. If Harry had his charm, they might get further. If it was just his charm and his wife was charming too, hey, maybe they would go further. But Meghan's not charming. She can flip on a dime. You can think you have her, but oh, she told you to do something, like release a trailer for her Spotify show 5 months before it was going to debut, and then blame you when the reaction was negative, or blame you that there was this big chunk of time between when she released the trailer because she demanded it and when the show was ready, because that was her fault. But she can't admit fault. She can't get out of the victim cycle. And the victim cycle is what is killing their brand. It's what's killing their brand. They could maybe adjust. Maybe they could sort of make things better. But I don't think she genuinely wants to. I think that she just wants to be a victim. She just thinks if she plays that card long enough, that maybe, just maybe, it'll work. But what we have seen is that it's not working anymore. I would argue even in this last year, last 6 months, accusing somebody of racism, bigotry, those sorts of things, it carries less and less weight, because people are realizing now more than ever that those accusations have been used inappropriately and that they have been used to smear people. And it's something that sometimes now people are ignoring because they were used inappropriately. They were used in the wrong situations. And now they've lost their legitimacy and their potency because some people have decided that to use that as an accusation to avoid, let's say, accountability. And I feel like Meghan Markle is one of those people. And I feel like the general public now is no longer taking that at face value. They're no longer going, yes, yes, I understand. They're no longer believing her sob story on Oprah. I'd be interested to hear. Let me know in the comments below. What was the moment that you realized that Meghan was sort of a fraud, a failure, or somebody that she wasn't portraying herself to be? Because I think everybody's sort of hitting that mark where they're not believing her as much anymore. They're disliking her more now. And Meghan is trying to, let's say, fix things by not really fixing things, by just doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result, and being distressed when articles like the Vanity Fair piece came out, when she could have addressed it years ago by just doing something simple. Be nice to people, work well with people, produce decent material. And then some of those accusations may go away. But I have a feeling at this point, I think those accusations are here to stay. And if Harry and Meghan can't get their act together, I think Netflix is leaving, and I don't think they have much of a hope for 2025 and beyond for mega deals and mega bucks coming in. But I'd be curious to get your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below, and I shall see you again very soon. Bye.